Coming up on a newscast tonight. Seoul accepts Pyongyang's request to postpone working-level talks while discussions will center around setting the details for the historic summit. South Korea's top diplomat highlights denuclearization will be made the priority agenda. South Korean artists wrap up their visit to Pyongyang with a final show that brought together performers from both sides. The warm reception and the suggestion of holding another such event are signs of greater exchanges to come. While rival parties continue to lock horns over ways to revise the constitution, there's added pressure on the parliament, with the presidential office urging lawmakers to make headway before the April extraordinary session is up. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from Arirang Tower in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. While stating South Korea and the United States will continue to share the goal of a complete denuclearization of the North, Seoul's top diplomat emphasized a certain degree of flexibility will be necessary and that they are still gauging how far the regime is willing to go. Kwon Jang-ho has our top story.
South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa stressed that flexibility will be required to have a frank and comprehensive discussion with North Korea during the upcoming Inter-Korean and Pyongyang-Washington summits. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, however, Kang explained denuclearization remains the primary objective.
We are making preparations to make the denuclearization of North Korea an important topic at the South North Korea Summit and the North Korea-US Summit. We expect more specific details to be reached in our preparatory negotiations.
To the surprise of the international community, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told South Korean envoys and Chinese President Xi Jinping that he's open to discussing denuclearization. Kang said Seoul will clarify what this may entail during the preparatory steps of the summit, and she added that there will also be discussions with Washington on the process and timeframe over how to dismantle the regime's nuclear program. However, there has also been calls for North Korea's human rights abuses to be tackled at the upcoming summits. Earlier in March, the United Nations Human Rights Council renewed a resolution condemning the regime's human rights situation, which Pyongyang then denounced. Although Seoul's foreign minister said that the issue remains a key concern for South Korea, she was cagey over whether it would be brought up in the upcoming talks.
We have continued to cooperate with the international community on North Korea's poor human rights record and have taken part at the UN to try and improve the situation. South Korea also has its own North Korea Human Rights Act. But on whether we should include this issue at the upcoming summit, for a government, I think more preparation is needed.
Kang also said that South Korea is continuing to cooperate with all related nations, such as China and Japan, and confirmed that a trilateral summit between the three sides is being planned for May. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Seoul has accepted Pyongyang's request to postpone the working-level talks originally planned for today. The discussion on protocol, security, and news releases for the upcoming Inter-Korean summit will now take place on Thursday. The North said it will send a 6-member delegation to the meeting and confirm the list on the day itself. The South is considering resizing its team from 7 to 6. Seoul also accepted the regime's offer to hold working-level talks on Saturday to touch on ways to set up an inter-Korean hotline between the offices of the leaders of the two Koreas. The visiting musicians from South Korea topped off their concert in Pyongyang by singing for peace and reunification during a joint performance with the North's Samjiyeon Orchestra. Kim Bo-geun brings us the sights and sounds from the emotional finale.
The 160-member art troupe, together with a taekwondo team, returned to South Korea early Wednesday morning, bringing the curtain down on the historic 5-day stay in the North Korean capital. Though the trip was short, pundits say it was a successful event that planted new hopes for a better future between the two Koreas. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's surprise attendance at the first concert on Sunday and his abrupt proposal to hold another concert later this year is seen as a positive sign for further cooperation in the cultural sector. After the second performance on Tuesday, the organizers from both sides spoke of their feelings.
Everyone was so touched that they couldn't believe this is real. I think we will actually realize what happened when we return to South Korea.
I'm glad because I think the concert went well. Both sides did well.
For their last performance on Tuesday, musicians from the two sides began the 2-hour-long concert with their North Korean counterparts at around 3:30 p.m. South Korea time. The concert was held at the 12,000-seat Ryugyong Jeongju-young Gymnasium, which is 8 times larger than the venue for the first performance held on Sunday. The group, the first South Korean troupe to perform in North Korea since 2005, consisted of nearly a dozen artists, including legendary singers Cho Yong-pil and Lee Sun-hee, K-pop stars Red Velvet, and Seohyun of Girls' Generation. Unlike the first concert on Sunday, where Seohyun emceed by herself, this time she was accompanied by Choi Hyo-sung, a reporter from North Korean Central TV. The joint performance ended with a standing ovation after all the musicians sang 2 famous songs together, North Korea's See You Again and South Korea's Our Wish is Reunification. Following the performance, the South Korean artists, together with Culture Minister Do Jong-un, attended a dinner hosted by Kim Young-chul, Vice Chairman of the Central Committee of North Korea's Workers' Party. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
During the art troupe's stay in North Korea, the reclusive regime behaved rather differently from the past, surprising watchers in the South. Oh Jung-hee delves deeper into the implications of Pyongyang's efforts to project a new image.
On Sunday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un watched South Korean artists perform in Pyongyang. The next day, North Korea's state-run Rodong-sinmun published a photo of Kim and the South Korean artist on the first page of its paper. It also showed him greeting and shaking hands with every artist. North Korea's Korean Central News Agency also reported Kim said he was, quote, deeply moved to see citizens enjoy the performance and better understand South Korea's pop culture. Such coverage is in stark contrast to the regime's past reporting, where South Korean pop culture was rather called, quote, bourgeois capitalist culture. And that North Korea apologized for South Korean reporters being blocked from covering Sunday's concert also came as a surprise. The South Korean press had to watch Sunday's concert on a television in a nearby room, as the concert began right away after Kim Jong-un came without the reporters being notified. Kim Young-chul, a Workers' Party official in charge of inter-Korean affairs, showed up and apologized, saying he understands South Korean reporters' frustration. He added it wasn't intentional, but a result of a lack of communication. And unlike in the past, North Korea allowed South Korean reporters to film the streets of Pyongyang. A couple of South Korean artists who visited Pyongyang years ago said that the city has become much colorful. Spring flowers are in bloom in Pyongyang, and citizens could be spotted walking with relatively light clothing. The authorities provided internet and cell phones as well. All these pundits believe are not the results of a policy change to open the regime up to the outside world, but only moves by North Korea to paint itself as a normal country, as well as to show willingness to improve or at least not hurt inter-Korean relations ahead of the first summit talks with South Korea in over a decade. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Staying with the 4-day visit to Pyongyang by the South Korean artists, their role is integral to improving inter-Korean ties, of course. The first such concert this decade holds great significance and open doors to greater exchanges. Lee Ji-won sheds light on the importance of taking baby steps towards the next attainable goals from here on.
Inter-Korean cultural exchanges stretch back to 1985, when Seoul and Pyongyang held performances on the sidelines of the first reunion of war-torn families. Since then, the two Koreas engaged in several cultural and sport exchanges until the early 2000s, either to pave the way for a major diplomatic breakthrough that led to the thawing of ties, or to further underscore and celebrate the peaceful mood in the region. After several years of increasingly frosty relations, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in South Korea provided the optimal backdrop to resume exchanges. And according to experts, the latest South Korean performance in Pyongyang holds even more meaning, not only because it was the first in 13 years, but from the way it was arranged.
This time, it all happened very swiftly without the South Korean artists having to change their lyrics or anything. It shows how much both sides are trying to understand each other and be considerate.
The resumption of inter-Korean cultural exchanges is expected to bring about a ripple effect in other cultural aspects as well. South Korea's Culture Minister Do Jong-un, who led the South Korean art troupe to the north, said he hopes to resume numerous joint projects, including the excavation of the ancient Korean dynasty's Manoldae Palace, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the North's Kaesong City, and the compilation of unified Korean language for the dictionary 결의말 큰사전. Both projects had been running for about 10 years until they were halted in 2015.
Previously, there have been various ministerial-level meetings following the Inter-Korean Summit discussing specific ways to develop the relationship. So hopefully, after April's summit, these cultural exchanges and joint projects could be part of their talks.
Experts say the South Korean government should work with North Korea to set up an environment to make these exchanges more stable, so they are not merely a way to break through tense situations, but a genuine opportunity for Koreans on both sides of the border to understand each other better. But some experts say these wide array of cultural exchanges need to be taken step by step.
The differences are still so huge. Overwhelming the public with each other's culture could backfire and make people feel more distant from one another. Thus, along with carrying out cultural exchanges, the government should also help people understand North Korea and its culture.
After more than a decade of escalating tensions and a widening gulf between the two sides, Seoul and Pyongyang are once again utilizing inter-Korean cultural exchanges to narrow differences and work toward mutual understanding and harmony. 이지원, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in went to check out an after-school program for elementary students. There, he pledged to expand the services to accommodate more children. Hwang Oh-jun shares with us his remarks.
The South Korean president hopes an expansion of after-school programs will kill two birds with one stone by providing children with all-day care. It will help tackle the nation's record-low birth rate and the overwhelming burden of child-rearing that derails the careers of many Korean women. President Moon visited the classroom of an after-school program Wednesday afternoon to meet the children and their parents. Also joining were the ministers of Education, Public Administration, Health, and Gender Equality. President Moon noted that difficulties in child-rearing contribute to the low birth rate, a phenomenon that can cause communities to collapse. He emphasized that childcare and education are the responsibilities of the nation and that the government and the community must raise children together to resolve the issue.
정부의 목표는 필요한 모든 아이에게 공적인 돌봄을 지원하는 것입니다. 우선 최소한 맞벌이 가정의 아이들만이라도 지원할 수 있도록 해야 합니다.
As of now, around 330,000 children are benefiting from the government's daycare system. President Moon said through the after-school program, he will increase that number to 530,000. An additional 100,000 students will be allowed to stay in school until their parents pick them up after work, and another 100,000 students will be accommodated at new after-school daycare centers. Also, unlike the existing service, limited to first and second graders, President Moon said the program will gradually become available to all grade school students. And according to the president, it will also relieve parents of the financial burden of their children's private education. The South Korean leader emphasized that all children have the right to be cared for, and the administration's all-day care system will allow the government to protect that right. Hwang Oh-jun, Arirang News.
The nation's top office urged lawmakers to swiftly act on revising the National Referendum Act, which was ruled unconstitutional back in 2014. It will be the first step to enabling a public vote on a constitutional amendment. Our Chief Cheonggye correspondent Moon Gun-young tells us more.
Taking last resort, with South Korea's political parties stuck in second gear with no progress in advancing forward the nation's constitutional amendment agenda, the presidential Blue House has taken a last resort, going public with its call on the legislature to at least swiftly revise the National Referendum Act, the first step to enabling a public vote on a constitutional amendment.
As we near the opening of the Parliament's April extraordinary session, I've come forward today to request the National Assembly to swiftly revise the National Referendum Act.
South Korea is seeking to amend the constitution, which was last revised more than 30 years ago, and put the revision bill up for a public vote during the June 13th local elections. However, Seoul's National Assembly has been stuck on the process with the rival parties' lengthy standoff over the proposed constitutional changes, as well as over the law on national referendums. The country's law on national referendum was ruled unconstitutional in 2014 for putting a limit on the voting rights of overseas Koreans, with the court's recommendation for a revision bill. The political parties missed the 2015 deadline to revise the act, leaving the law null and void since 2016, which means even if the political parties do agree and come up with a single constitutional revision bill, the people will not be able to vote on it.
Leaving the national referendum law as unconstitutional is itself an act of challenge to the people's constitutional right and a serious damage to direct democracy guaranteed by our constitution.
Making note of the president's constitutional revision bill submitted to Parliament last month, President Moon's chief of staff reiterated the Blue House stance that it's ready to draw back the bill once the political parties come up with a single bill of their own.
The Parliament's decision to revise the national referendum law will confirm its intent and sincerity on amending the constitution.
The Blue House's news conference calling on Parliament to first take action on making it constitutional for Koreans to vote on various national issues is seen by many as the South Korean president putting his foot down on carrying out his campaign pledge to put to referendum a constitutional revision bill in tandem with the June 13th local elections. 문건영, Arirang News, the Blue House.
And it looks like lawmakers in Parliament needs to get a lot done during the April session, obviously. Yet all we have at this point is a total standstill with no progress made, meaning urgent issues like constitutional revision are stuck on hold. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
No signs of any concessions just yet. The floor leaders of the country's main parties failed to narrow their differences during a meeting Wednesday, reaching no agreement on getting parliamentary affairs moving again. They are still at odds over key contentious bills, including a revised Broadcast Act aimed at insulating public broadcasters from political influence, and a bill to establish an investigative body for dealing with corruption among high-ranking officials. With those bills held up, they made no progress on amending the Constitution either. The ruling party said it cannot accept the opposition's demands that Korea adopt a semi-presidential system that would shift more powers to a prime minister.
A semi-presidential system will result in incompetent president, and the prime minister handpicked by parliament will be able to exercise his powers to control the country. It's not right to divide leadership between a president and prime minister in the current administrative system we have, where flexible cooperation is required among ministries.
The main opposition Liberty Korea party, meanwhile, called on the ruling party to come up with its own proposal for revising the constitution and not base amendments on the president's version. It suggested a meeting of all the main parties and President Moon Jae-in himself if they are unable to thrash out their differences.
The ruling party needs to have the authority to make changes. We've already had several meetings between the floor leaders, but if the ruling party won't budge, there's a limit to what we can do. We must find a solution through dialogue. If the ruling party's floor leader doesn't have that authority, it's going to be a waste of time.
For now, it appears that the parties are far from a consensus, but the presidential office has raised the pressure on them. It's called for Parliament to change the law on national referendums during the April session so that the public can vote on a constitutional revision alongside local elections in June. Though the rival parties agreed on the need to deal with the matter swiftly, some in the opposition say it's not an issue where the Blue House should be the main one making demands. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
It's day 2 of the first annual Deconomy Forum on blockchain taking place in Seoul this week. The event brings together experts from the world over to exchange views and ideas on cryptocurrency regulation. Kim Hae-sung has more on what was discussed.
If 2017 was the year that cryptocurrencies took off, then 2018 seems to be the year of regulatory reckoning and its possible mainstream adoption, with cryptocurrencies even becoming one of the main themes at the G20 summit in Argentina in March.
What governments are mostly concerned with is whether or not people are using financial instruments for terrorism financing or money laundering, or in some cases, taking advantage of citizens. It's a sacred bond to keep money on behalf of another person. In terms of what you're seeing countries move towards is, AML KYC and the Bank Secrecy Act, that's been pretty established and been replicated across countries.
AML refers to anti-money laundering, and KYC means Know Your Customer, a process for businesses to report on suspicious behavior by clients and identify potential scams or fraudulent transactions. These measures help enhance security and prevent money laundering and crypto trading. Another concern is taxation, making sure people pay tax on realized gains. Market practices, consumer protection, and data privacy are other issues being raised by EU countries. Countries like China have also upped the level of regulation, banning digital asset exchanges and initial coin offerings and blocking online access to overseas trading platforms. Experts say regulation is needed to enhance safety and prevent hacking, but that it should be balanced to enable blockchain technology to grow.
In Korea, they recognize this is a major macro theme, blockchain technology and tokenization of the services business. So I think that South Korean government does recognize this, and they're coming up with a balanced approach that recognizes and makes room for ICOs, but also wants to make sure that players that are not bona fide are not coming to market.
The South Korean government banned minors from trading digital currency and enhanced ID verification amid concerns of a speculative bubble, and it is currently working on more detailed guidance like new taxation rules set to be announced later this year. Cryptocurrency is an uncharted territory, and experts say mitigating risks while allowing the cryptocurrency ecosystem to grow is key. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, shortly after Washington unveiled the list of Chinese imports to be hit with tariffs, Beijing responded. Retaliation, using similar measures against American goods, specifically targeting soybeans and vehicles. Cha Sang-mi updates us on the trade tensions heating up between the world's two economic superpowers.
Trade tensions between the world's two major economies are hotting up. China has struck back with a 25% tariff on 106 American imported goods categories, including soybeans, cars, and chemicals, according to CCTV. Beijing's announcement comes just hours after the U.S. unveiled a list of 1,300 Chinese goods subject to 25% tariffs as part of its punishment against Beijing over alleged intellectual property rights violations. The Chinese Commerce Ministry argues that the U.S. has violated the spirit and principles of the World Trade Organization regulations. The tariff list by the U.S. Trade Representative covers annual Chinese imports worth $50 billion, including industrial robots, telecommunications equipment, and biomedical products, which are part of China's 10 major core industrial development projects. Bloomberg reported that the U.S. is trying to undermine China's development efforts in these areas as China tries to move away from its current manufacturing-based economy towards a more technologically advanced economy. The U.S. measures, which will not take effect until May 11th after public opinion has been gathered, come a day after Beijing slapped tariffs on nearly 130 American items, mainly agricultural goods. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the capital was very refreshing after the rain today, and it looks like April showers will continue.
That's right, Daniel. Now, today's nationwide rain washed away the dust, and it would be nice if we have a nice sunny day tomorrow to enjoy it. But it looks like the rain clouds are coming in again. In the early morning tomorrow, the rain starts from the central region and expands out to the rest of the country. Now, most regions will get between 10 and 40 millimeters, while the southern regions will get a lot more. Now, Seoul wakes up to 8 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju are similar at 8 and 7 degrees. Further down south, Busan will begin at 9 degrees. Now, the rain will clear up into the day. Seoul will peak up to 10 degrees. Gwangju and Gyeongju hitting up to 16 and 10 degrees, while Busan will reach up to 12 degrees. After Friday, the sky will remain clear with nice, reasonable temperatures. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thank you for staying with us.